This is Mickey Maudlin with Harper One, talking with Tom Wright at the Grand Duchess Bed and Breakfast in Red Hook, New York. Talking to Tom Wright about his new book, Simply Jesus.
I think we have diminished Jesus by trying to fit him into either the category of he was a social reformer who did some neat stuff and then died too young, or he died so that we could go to heaven, and what was all that earlier bit about. The fact that we put him into those two boxes is symptomatic of a much larger malaise, that we have not allowed Jesus himself to tell us his own story of what he was all about.
The reduction of the gospel to Jesus died for your sins so you can go to heaven is a way of diminishing or reducing Jesus' ministry so that it is mostly otherworldly and we can get on with our world today. And you're saying that his ruler and king today is a lot more challenging to our day-to-day lives.
His rule is far more challenging than we have allowed ourselves to imagine. I mean, one of the texts I go back to again and again is at the end of Matthew's Gospel, where the risen Jesus says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." Now, most Christians are quite happy to say, as in that Easter hymn, "Now above the sky he's king." That's safe. He can be king way up there somewhere. We'll run the world down here. Or if we want to connect with him, we go and say our prayers, we go to church, we do the spirituality thing. We have lived with this split level world, and even if we want to join it back together, we have no idea how to do that.
The idea that Jesus rules now is a controversial, provocative, or challenging idea?
Exactly. It's scary because people have an idea of, quote, theocracy, unquote. If God is actually in charge now, we know what that means. Some mad clerics down the road are going to take it into their heads that they are the official spokespeople and they're going to tell us what to do, and we don't like that. This isn't just a theoretical thing about Jesus being in charge. This is the basis of the church's agenda. This is what Christians ought to be doing, ought to be studying how to make it happen that God is king on earth as in heaven.
One of the things you say about your new vision of Jesus is that he is the active king and ruler of the world now. And one of the problems is that the church is ignoring what he says.
The book we call The Acts of the Apostles is actually partly written in order to say this is what it looks like when God becomes king.
Messy.
It's messy, it's painful, the church sometimes gets it wrong, sometimes gets it right, and we've lost the art of figuring out how politics and faith, how church and society actually go together. The Anabaptist is always in danger, I think, of retreating to saying politics is always a dirty game, we just shouldn't go near there. And okay, politics always has the capacity to be dirty, but what I see in the Gospels is a Jesus who gets his hands dirty, in fact, who gets his hands pierced with nails. The stuff Jesus is doing, his healings and the feastings and all the rest of it, are dependent on the fact that he is involved in a project which can only be accomplished by his own death. And explaining, that's kind of really bizarre to most people. Even the death of Socrates, the great Athenian philosopher, his followers saw that as kind of exemplifying the noble vision of philosophy which he'd articulated. But they themselves would have said, we'd much rather it hadn't had to happen. Whereas Jesus' followers were quite convinced that the kingdom only really happens because of Jesus' death and resurrection. To understand that is really very difficult for us.
So you're trying to redeem the word theocracy for today?
I never quite know whether to try to redeem the word theocracy or not. I think I would like to. It may be too bad a word for some people.
But how does it not descend into a Charlemagne sense of ruling theocratically, in the sense of having the state enforce theology and punishing those who don't
Here's
disagree?
the key thing. One of the biggest questions that Jesus addresses in the New Testament is when James and John say, "Can we please have seats at your right and your left?" And Jesus says, "You have no idea what you're talking about." And he calls them, the other disciples, and he says, "Listen, the rulers of this world do it one way. They bully and boss people around and frighten everybody. We're going to do it the other way."